Alright, so we saw the two madrigas in the Shem Havaya. We saw there was the union of Shem Havaya to Le'ela and Shem Havaya to Latata. Well, that was the two shemas in the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim that Moshe Rabbeinu said according to Rashi, or the Eivisha said according to the other Meforshim, by the Yud Gimel, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim after the Chet HaEgo, that Havaya, Kel, Racham, Chanun. And so we saw that those, what was the necessity for saying the Shem Havaya twice, because it indicated two levels in Shem Havaya itself. And one was called the Shem Havaya of the lower level, Shem Havaya to Latata, and the base was Shem Havaya de Le'ela, the higher level in the Shem Havaya. So then we went on to say that Shem Havaya de Latata, Ubechina Shem Havaya de Shtaushles. Now, the union of Shem Havaya de Shtaushles means how the Shem Havaya is Be'ika, what you might call Mahaviv. It brings about the whole union, the union of Shtaushles. And that's what we see, that the general view or taich of the word Havaya is being, or bringing into being. Havaya means to bring into being. And it's from the word Hoveh, which means to be or being. So Yud Kei Vav Kei is the idea of making being. So that indicates that the Shem Havaya is at least in some way a mocker for the whole union of Seder Shtaushel, so the whole union of the creation. It must have some connection. He said the whole word Havaya is connected with the union, the whole Shem Havaya connected with the union of Nisavas Oelamet. And therefore he says that the first level in the Shem Havaya is connected with the Seder, the Shtaushel Oelamet. V'hainu, that means to say, b'chinas ha'oyer, shebo b'chinas tzimtzum, di'eis be'erech ha'olemes, or li'slabish b'teichom lach yezam. In other words, that's a oyer which comes through a union of tzimtzum, which means reduction and retraction, in order that it should be be'erech, it should have some state of readiness or ability to be in an oifen van lislabish beteich ha'elames, to enter the elames bislabshes, and to give them chayes. Now that means to say that when we say the union of tzimtzum, then we don't necessarily mean the tzimtzum arishon, the original concept of tzimtzum. We mean that after there's already a beginning of the Seder of Olam, Shtaushel as Olam is, then from each Olam and from each level in each Olam there's a tzimtzum to the one Lamata Himenu. And therefore it's called the Oer, which is bore continuously in a form of tzimtzum, in order that it should be Be'erach. Be'erach meaning on a basis of level or comparison to the Olames, that it should be mislabish be'teichom lahachi yosam, to give them their chayas, and that means that it's bepnimius ha'olames, it enters the olames like a oil in a kli, like a oil to a kli. V'shem havaya zev shebederek klau hu koilo daled olames atzilus bria yetzira asiyah. On this particular level of the Shem Havaya, which is the Shem Havaya Sakti Shtaushles, it contains in itself Koilo, the Dalet Elames, Atzilas Bria Yetzira Vasiyah. In other words, that the Shem Havaya itself is a general state which carries in itself pratim of all the four elements, meaning that all the four elements are like four details inside the general oil of the Shema Havaya. Now that doesn't mean to say that Shema Havaya is a makif aleihem. It's koilo, it includes in itself four different stages or 4 different levels, each of which is mashpia to a different Olam. And so all of the 4 of them, as it were, make up the completion and the shleimus of the Shem Havaya. Beit Chaim, that's a famous work from the Arizal. The Dalet Olamus Atzilas Bria Yetzira Asiya Hein Havaya Achas. They are like one expression of the Shem Havaya. How is that? Yud is Shaitu Olama Atzilas. Hey is Shaitu Bria. Vov Yetzira. And the Kei Acharena Ba'asiyah. In other words, that the 4 Olamas, each of them has a Kabbalah receives chayes from a particular level of the Shem Havaya. And it's one on the din if in Yud is Chochmah, and Chochmah is shaykh in Atzilas, because Atzilas is beklalas the union of Chochmah, and this is one on. The Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, Perek Lamed Vov, in Perek Lamed Hes, in the famous Hakua, that the union of Chochmah is Meir B'Kol HaAtzilas. And that's to say the highest Ois in the Shem Havaya is shaykh to the highest Olam, what that's the union, so that the Iker Chayas of Atzilas is from the Yud of the Shem Havaya. Now that doesn't mean to say that there's no other details in Atzilas apart from Chochmah, but the Iker Hashpoah of the whole of Atzilas is from Chochmah. And therefore we see that Atzilas is an Elam which is bought over Kolul in Elokus. But therefore the union of Chochmah is seen in a Bittul, as is one known, that it's Bittul of Iskalul is Mamish in Elokus. Therefore, the Yud is shayach to Atzilas, and that's very important because it's well known that Atzilas is different than the other Olamas, in that Atzilas is Mamish Elokus. Mashenkin Bria, Yetzira, Vasiya, they're already Nivroim, they're already things which are created from Elokus. Therefore, the Yud being as it is a Nakuda, we're going to see more about the Indian from Nakuda. And it's bottled Lagamri to the union of Lamaila Himenu. It's got no Matthias, as it were. It's bottled, but Matthias. Therefore, it's shy to give the highest to Atzilas, which is still Elokus. Mashenkin Bria is already in of Nivroim. Therefore, that's the union of K. What the K is already expression, but it's got a shape in length and breadth. Well, that's the union of K, Bria, meaning that Bria is already a broadening out of the Shefa into a form and a shape. But that's the union of Bina and Bria. Huh?
Gesundheit.
Gesundheit?
No, he sneezed, so I said blessing.
Huh? Bria, Vav is Yetzira, and Yetzira is already the union of Midas, as is one known, and therefore the Vav is the union of the Vav Midas. That Be'ikah there are 6 Midas, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hoid, Yesoid. Malchus is also Nikla in the Midas of Malchus, another union apart from the Midas. Therefore the Vav is Meir in Yetzira, and the K Achroina, what that's the union from Malchus of the Shem Havaya, or that's Shach to Asiya. That's Meir in the union of Elam Asiya. Once again, we see that the K has gotten itself a breadth and an expansion more than the other Oisias. The same, the Ashpoah into Asiya makes the whole Elam until you get to Elam Azeh Agashmi, which is already in the form of a Yesh. So that's clearly is that Shem Havaya embraces all the 4 Olamas and is mashpia to the different Olamas. But there are prat in a more specific way. The union for Shem Havaya is shy to the Olama Atzilas itself. In other words, that was talking in a general way, which, as we saw sweeps over and spans over all the Arba Elamas. Or in a more particular way, the Inyan von Shem Havaya is Shaitu Atzilas. We just said that it's Shaitu the Inyan von Isavitz of the Elamas, on the Staubschulas Elamas. As like we've had on many occasions, even here in this Emshech, the Elam Atzilas is the Ika Mamutza between Ein Sof and all the other Elamas, that they literally have the Shoresh in Elam Atzilas. Therefore, generally speaking, the Shem Havaya is all the other Elamas. But in a more specific way, the Gilu, the Shem Havaya Shaitu Atzilas, and it's to the Esesphiras that they are in Atzilas, and they're like a mamutza, they're like a middle point through which all the Shefa goes, Balavachi, through Malchus into Elamas Bria, Yitzirah, Asiyah. And therefore he says, the Bedera Pratu Esesphiras Atzilas, Yud B'chochma, Kei Babina Chulu. And he doesn't bother to go into the other details, which Vav is in the Midas, and Kei Achreina and the Inyan from Malchus. So that's, generally speaking, the Inyan at the Shaykhs with the Shem Havaya Delatata to Atzilas, Bedel Prat, and generally speaking to the whole Isavas of the Elamas. For Inyan, the Inyan HaChochma, he begins Nakuda. But the Inyan Asfiras HaChochma, if we talk about it individually, is an Inyan from a Nakuda, Shelamayla Adayin Miphinas Hasoga V'Havona. It's completely beyond the whole Inyan of understanding. Yeah, what Hasoga is grasped, that's like the Inyan of the appearance in the mind of a grasping of the Hasoga. And Havona is when you bring it into the details and you can say, and you analyze it into details more and you can say you really understand it, that's Inyan from Havona. Because Hasoga is like the idea of grasping it, and Havona is like the idea of developing it into full understanding. So Chochma is beyond all that for the time being. Shazo b'chinas tfisa, b'chinas ispashtus erva. I'm sorry, that the Inyan of Shelamayla b'chinas Hasoga v'Havona. What is Hasoga v'Havona? That's Inyan from tfisa, b'chinas ispashtus erva roichem. That the Inyan of Hasoga v'Havona, their Inyan is grasp, that you grasp the Seichel. B'chinas ispashtus, it spreads out into oirech v'roichev. Oirech means length, and roichev means breadth. In other words, when a thing comes into Bina, you have it in different expansions. Oirech meaning the Inyan could go down from level to level in the same Hasoga itself. And Reichev is that it spreads out into all sorts of different ideas and links with other ideas, the idea of breadth and expansion. So he said, that's the Inyan Hasoga. But he said, Nakuda, being the Inyan from Chochma, is Lamaila Adayin Mizeh. It's completely beyond that altogether. Kamoyal Derech Moshe, Aborak, Shemavrik Beha'ora Piseimiyas, like a lightning flash, which, how do you call it, appears, it flashes, mavrik, it flashes, beha'ora piseimiyas, with a sudden flash, how do you call it, a sudden reflection, ve'enu b'chinas yishashvus v'tvisa. When you look at a lightning flash, then it flashes into the heavens, but it doesn't sort of settle anywhere. It doesn't have any, it doesn't sort of settle in any place, or it doesn't fill up any keli or anything of that nature. It just flashes in the heavens and then, as it were, disappears. And that's called a borach ha-mavrik, a flash which flashes. Akamoy kain hu inyan brikas uskiras haseicho. So it is the beginning of all reasoning, which is chokhmah. It's a lightning flash and like a general survey. It's something general and just a huge general glance at the Inyan of the, say, skira means like a general survey at the Inyan of the Seichel. V'zehu ha'inyan sha'chochma hi ois yud. And that's why it is that chochma is davke the letter Yud of the Shem Havaya. Hainu, he said, Bechinas Nakuda Shelamayla Mea Sog. In other words, what does a Nakuda indicate? A Nakuda indicates that something which is an intense, what you might call dot, which is Lamayla Mea Sog. In other words, it's so intense that it can't come into any form of revelation. Therefore, it's like an intense entity of something which is beyond explanation. And that doesn't mean it's just got everything together so generally. Excuse me, if you wouldn't mind, I don't like people looking at me through their fingers. And so I said, I don't like you looking at me through your fingers. You have to pay attention and not cover your face with your hands. So, there's a mirror. It's not the pshat that it's just like a general statement of the whole Hasoga. It's an intense entity which is really beyond Hasoga altogether. And therefore, in order to bring it into details, into Bina, you've got to go through a further Inyan of Tzimtzum. The truth is. And therefore, it's not just a general, as it were, general rule with all the details that are going to come out of it, but it's an intense, essential entity which is really beyond the whole grasp of Seichel. And that's called Nakuda. That's one Inyan in Nakuda. And that's what Chokhmah is. So therefore, Mitzad Echad, Chokhmah is the beginning of understanding. Because when the mensch gets that Borach HaMavrik, he feels that he's got something. Yeah. In other words, he feels that he's got the idea. But if you say to him, okay, explain it to me, he says, I can't do that either. I've got to wait until I get it into my mind more. But I feel that I've experienced the Seichel. So that's what's called Borach HaMavrik. It's called like a lightning flash, which is an intense gilu of the atzmius of the Seichel, of not a general rule of the Seichel. It's not just a general rule for which details are going to come out. So that's one inyan in what we call Nakudas HaChokhmah. So now, so the Rebbe, וזהו עניין שהחוכמה היא או איש יוד שהוא נקודה למעלה מהסוגה. אמנם עניין הנקודה היא מוירה גם כן על בחינס הצמצום בשביל איסאבס החוכמה. But a nakuda as another inyan to it, that it's also indicatory of how Chokhmah came about. In other words, that there's two ways now that we're going to look at this idea of the Nakuda. There's two views of the Nakuda. One is that I'm looking at the Nakuda legabi the Makablim, legabi Bina. But Bina is the Makabel, and eventually Bina becomes Habona, and eventually it goes down into Midas, and it goes through the whole Seder. Well, those other lower koiches are called Makablim. They're the receivers from the Nakuda. So legabi the receivers, the Nakudas are a Nakuda because he's beyond their reach, he's beyond their inyan of Havana Vasuk. However, another look at the Nakuda is legabi where it came from. So what is the relation of the Nakuda to where it came from? And why is it a Nakuda legabi where it came from? In other words, that it's also a Nakuda legabi where it came from, and it's a Nakuda legabi the Makablim. But the mashmoes of those two ideas in the Nakuda are different. And therefore he says that the inyan of the Nakuda is also indicatory of the way that came about, and that's the inyan of Tzimtzum Bishvil Isavasa Chokhmah. That in order to bring about the coming into being of Chokhmah, that's what we call making of Chokhmah, there was a Tzimtzum. Ki we just saw that Chokhmah was at least the beginning of revelation to the receivers. Eventually, from Chokhmah, you will eventually get into Bina, albeit through another form of Tzimtzum. Of a Sokhos, if you've already made a preparation for one of our Asogim. He said, and through many levels of Ishtaushalus, there will also be Chokhmah in Bria, Yetzirah, and Olam Asiyah, Ad Ishavas Aseichel Nushi, until there be also Chokhmah Lamata in the Bnei Adam, in the mensch Lamata, human Seichel. In other words, it's all the way down from Chochmah Elohim and Atzilus all the way down into Chochmas B'nai Adam, the inyan from Chochmah of Seichel and Ushi. So there was the Rebbe, since that Nakuda is going to open itself out and undergo a whole series of Ishtaushlas, Ad Kedei Kach, and therefore he said, how did it come about from the Eibishter who is Ein Seif? Yelamayla me Atzilus is Ein Seif HaMa'atzil, the Eibishter is Ein Seif, and he brings about Atzilus. But he's Ein Seif and completely Muda from all these Madrigas of Ishtaushlas. So there was the Rebbe, how do you get the inyan of Chochmah from Ein Seif? So therefore he says, Lazois, Yisavas, Ein Seif HaMa'atzil, Hu alidei hatzimtzum. And therefore, in order to get the inyan of Chochmah, there has to be a inyan from tzimtzum in order to produce Chochmah, from whence that Chochmah will then be mishtaushel into other levels and eventually into Seichel and Ushi Lamata. So there was said the Rebbe, that tzimtzum hazeh, inyan hatzimtzum hazeh, hu b'chinas siluk ha'atzmas kaviyochel. D'liyesh ha'chochmah hi ba'ein ha'reich legabe ha'atzmas, lazeis hi efshaliyes yisavas ha'chochmah al yedei b'chinas yisavas ha'chochmah al yedei b'chinas tzimtzum u'miyut levad, through a inyan of tzimtzum and lessening only, shezeh inyan ha'tzimtzumim of seidei ishtaushlas, ki im b'chinas tzimtzum otzum. There has to be a tremendous tzimtzum, shehu inyan siluk oyer ha'atzmas, the withdrawal of the essential oyer of the Ein Seif Lamayla me'atzilus, all to get a siluk oyer ha'atzmas. In other words, that if you want to get Chochmah as a first level in Seder Olam HaAtzilus, you have to have a tzimtzum, a withdrawal completely of the previous level, which was the Ein Seif Lamayla me'atzilus, and then you leave over, as it were, a Nakuda, and then from that Nakuda there can be later a development, like we saw, from one level to the other, further tzimtzum. But those tzimtzumim are what are called miyut. They're only like a lessening of the earth. They're not a complete, as it were, withdrawal of the earth altogether. But in order to bring about the beginning of Chochmah itself, then there had to be a tzimtzum in an oven of siluk ha'atzmas. Due to the fact that Chochmah is Ein Areich, it has absolutely no basis of status or comparison, whatever. Like Gabi Ha'atzmas, therefore, E.F. Shalia is Yisavas HaChochmah alidei a normal tzimtzum, as you might call it, a tzimtzum umiyut levad. But that's the tzimtzumim, how they are in Ishtaushlas. Ki'im, it has to be a tzimtzum otzum, a tremendous withdrawal, shehuin and siluk ha'atzmas. So now that's similar to what we find by the tzimtzum harishon. That by the inyan of the tzimtzum harishon, and we differ the tzimtzum harishon from all the other tzimtzumim in Seder Ishtaushlas. So we say the tzimtzum harishon was a withdrawal, a complete withdrawal of the and the inyan from a mokim panui, as we call it, on many occasions. And then from there you have the Gilui HaKav and the whole Riches, which comes after the inyan of the Rishima, as brought down, so there's a whole series of inyanim going to get to the tzimtzum harishon. And we say that tzimtzum harishon is different than the tzimtzum of other tzimtzumim in Seder Ishtaushlas. So now we're saying a Chiddush Dover, that even the tzimtzum from Lamayla me'atzilus to Atzilus, which is already after the tzimtzum harishon, it's already inside the Seder HaElemes, in order to bring about the inyan, the Gilui HaChochmah from Lamayla me'achochmah, it has to be a similar type of tzimtzum, a siluk and a withdrawal from the how it was ad Atzilus. In other words, the inyan from Arich, or the inyan of Chochmah Stimoya v'Ka'ita B'Zeh, like we saw before. Here we saw inyan from how do you call it? What do we call Parsa? Nochad Zalch Inyanim. Over here, the Rebbe is mechadish that alaf we said that there was inyan from Parsois, from the Inyanim. Well, the truth of the matter is to actually produce the inyan of the the Nakuda, how it is mamish in Atzilus, there has to be a siluk which is very similar to the inyan of the Tzimtzum Arisha. From that we see that this is already the inyan from the Nakuda Lekabi Lamayla Himeno. In other words, this is what we might call the Nakuda Milmata Lamayla. We had before the Nakuda Milmata Lamayla. I'm sorry, Milmayla Mata. We had the Nakuda how he is, and then I go from the Nakuda downwards. And now we're saying we're looking at that Nakuda and we're saying how did he come from? Lamayla Himeno. In other words, we're going from the Nakuda up to the. In other words, there's two different views of the Nakuda. And since we want to get from Oyer Ein Seif, Mamish, Lamayla Me'atil, we want to end up with a Nakuda, which is able to become a Mokeh for Ishtaushlus, then we have to have a Siluk, we have to take away, as it were, the whole Gilui of the Oyer Ein Seif that we had up to now. And that's similar to the inyan of the Tzimtzum Arishan. And that's what he writes now in bracket. But it's not to be confused with the Tzimtzum Arishan. The Tzimtzum Arishan is another level in Tzimtzumim altogether. This is bedugma to the Tzimtzum Arishan. Because the Tzimtzum Arishan doesn't leave over an akuda like Chokhmah, it doesn't leave anything. It leaves what we call a Mokum Pono. That's a whole slightly different idea. O Kemoi Bechinas Tzimtzum Harishan. It's similar to that idea. Shuin in Siluch Oyer Hagodel Ala Tzad. Now that's a series of abbreviations of the Lashon of the Eitz Chaim. When you get to the Tzimtzum Arishan, that's a Siluch of the Oyer Hagodel Ala Tzad. Yeah, the putting aside of the great light on the side. V'akavanahi sha'Tzimtzum Arishan, and the kav which later was nimshach from the Tzimtzum Arishan, yeah, ha'ikahu b'shvil ha'amshocha d'mamaliko almin. The whole ikar purpose of that was to bring about a mokeh for what will later become the inyan of the Pnimi, the mamaliko almin, and that was the inyan of the kav. The kav is the mokeh of mamaliko almin, as well known. Mashikin Seiviv Kol Almin. Seiviv Kol Almin is the oil which was mistalek, as it were, which withdrew from the Chalol and from the Mokeh of the Kav. And that's called the inyan of the oil Godel we just called, and that's Seiviv Kol Almin. But the inyan of the Tzimtzum was in order to get to the Kav, which is the Mokeh of the Mamalik Kol Almin. Mashikin B'chinas Seiviv Kol Almin. Hu amshocha milmayla me'atzimtzum mibchinas ha'igul hagodel shelifnei hakav. Igul hagodel means how the oil retracted, and the keel remained in the form of an eagle, as it were. Well, that igul hagodel, that's the oil that retracted with the tzimtzum and left the mokum ponim. Seivul kalamin comes from there. Now remember, that's in the original tzimtzum, and that's in order to get to the inyan of the klalos inyan of mamala kolam. However, the inyan for Chokhmah here is a slightly lower level. It's not the inyan of the Nakuda here is not the Nakuda which is Nimshach Tekav. This is the inyan of the Shorish and the Mokeh of Chokhmah. We made a Tzimtzum in order to make a Mokeh of Chokhmah, and that Chokhmah is like a Nakuda Bilvat Gabi De'er Shehoya Mikoidim. So in that regard, it's similar to the Tzimtzum Harishan, but not that we're mamish comparing them, but we're saying that they're bedimia, because here after the Tzimtzum, we're left over with a Nakuda, which is after all a Mokeh to order to the inyan of Seidish Taushel. By the Tzimtzum Arishan, you still got a tremendous way to go before you get to any Mokeh to Seidish Taushel. And at first says the Rebbe, that's the Dimian, and therefore he says K'moi. In other words, it's a similar concept, but it's not mamish the same meaning. Now he says, this is like in the form of a kasha. In other places it's mavua. The amshocha, the chokhmah, he shaloi alidei tzimtzum. But the amshocha of chokhmah is not through tzimtzum. Vayim mashu kosev me bozeh b'diba amaschu matzazu, but it's a maim of Pesach, Reish Mem Zayin. Now, as far as I know, we don't have that maimah. We don't have that hemshech or whatever it was. So I'm not able to look up to and tell exactly what was written over there. However, Hainu, he said that means to say, what do we mean that the Amshocha Chokma is loyal to Tzimtzum? He said, Hainu B'chinas Oyer Ein Seif Mamish Shemeir B'Chokma. V'hu B'chinas Pnimius HaChokma. Or that's the inyan of Pnimius HaChokma. So, Lefi Zekumta is that there is a level in Chokma which is loyal to Tzimtzum. And this whole inyan of the siluk of the oil, in order to leave behind our nakuda, what for that nakuda there'll be seidish to Ausheles, or that's chitzonius achokma. That's not pnimis achokma, ela chitzonius. Of a pnimis achokma mamish, or that comes from the area seif shaloy aledetzimtum. Now that's mavur in Havim Mekemis in Siddur, many places in Siddur, not just in that Hemshah of Matzazu. And in some above Bariches and in Ayin Beis and in many of the big Hemshechim from the Rebbe. And that's what we have a famous statement from the Arizal in the Kisvei Arizal, where he says, Pnimius Abba, he Pnimius Atik. The Pnimius of Chokma is the Pnimius of Keser. And he says, V'lo yadati hatam. He said, I heard that from my Moyer Shemati Mimoyer Rizal. I heard that from the Arizal. He said he doesn't know what is the view of it. And he said, "V'lo havi noisi." In another place he writes that "Lo havi noisi." I didn't understand how that can be. Oh, that's what he told me, so I just had to be makaber. Well, the Fisekumta is that there's a madrega in Chokma which ain't nachanami. The Fi Seder Hanomali, or the how they call it, the Fi Seder Harogil, doesn't make any sense in Seichel and in Havana how that can possibly. Yeah, how that can possibly be. In other words, that the etzeminian or the pnimius hakeser, or that itself becomes the inyan of Chokma. Are you asleep over there? Hello? Give him a stool. Listen, boy, that's not going to work with me. Okay? Either you pay attention, or you have to go to another class. All right? Well, we're not going to have that sort of thing. All right? This is the Rebbe that the inyan from Pnimis HaChochma is Pnimis HaKeser Mamish, and that's not Lefi Seder HaSeichel. We can't really understand how that could be, and it's not Alidei Tzimtzum, no, this is Kilu HaAtzmas, what you might call also in the form of a Nakuda, but that's another idea of the Nakuda. You know, if you sometimes take a magnifying glass, and you intensify all the pneumius of the magnifying glass in one place, then it burns a hole, because like the whole intensity of the light going through the magnifying glass intensifies in one. It's just like the whole essentiality of the light, how it reaches the magnifying glass becomes one essential nakuda, and that means that the whole atzmus of the shemesh is come into one nakuda mamish, as it were. But the way of that function of the glass is brought the whole essentiality into one nakuda. Well, that's another form of nakuda, and that's a nakuda pnimius of Chokma. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in Perek Lamed Vav, in the famous Haggadah over there, that he says that the inyan from Ein Oyer Ein Seif Meir B'Kol HaAtzilas El Alidei Yishlabshus B'Chokma Tchila, and he says Ki HaChokma Hi Echad HaEmes V'hu Levadei V'Ein Zu Losei Zu Hi Madreiges HaChokma. That the inyan from Chokma in Chokma is appears Hu Levadei V'Ein Zu Losei, but that's inyan from Atzmas Ein Seif Mamish, how he can design. Well, that's an inyan that he said Shemait. Look over there, and you'll see the Alter Rebbe writes the same thing. He writes Shemaitim Mimoy Rizal. Pink to see with the Rabbeinu Chaim V'Tov says that he heard from the Rizal Shemaitim Mimoy Rizal. However, that's a inyan Pnimi V'Atzmi, which is not Al Pi Seder Harogil, and therefore he says that that's the inyan from Pnimis HaChokma, or Chitzonius HaChokma, something which should become a nakuda which is shy to open itself out into Bina. Well, for that, you have to have a nakuda, another sort of nakuda. Dainu, a nakuda klodiyas, alidei, that you took away the atzmius of what you might call the ain safeness, as it were, how do you call it, the bleak wool of the oyer, and you left behind a form of a inyan, which albeit is like a kitzer of the whole arichas, but it's a very limited and intensified Nakuda Gabi what's going to come out later. But it's not the intensity of the whole Atmos, because it came through the Tzimtzum, like you said, of the Atmos. And the Pharaoh, says the Rebbe, well, those are two inyanim. Or that inyan that Pnimis HaChochma appears Shalei de Tzimtzum, well, that's another inyan, and that's Pnimis Abahi, Pnimis Atik. And therefore it's Mavua. In some of and Ayin Beis Bariches, Atik is inyan from Tainuk. Atik is Shaita the Koyach HaTainuk. Really, the inyan of Chochma is a form of Gilui Koyach HaOinig. It's like that the Oinig, the essential power of the Nefesh, to be Misanaik, to feel this unbelievable fulfillment, or Oinig, comes into, and Seichel is like a beginning of the whole Koyach of Oinig in a tremendous Tzimtzum. And so that comes in the form of Tzimtzum Atzmi, which is not Tzimtzum but Derech Silo. And that's Pnimis Atik, Pnimis Abba. Of the inyan of a Ha'ora, which is Shait to say this Taushel, does Tavke through Tzimtzum, Venim Shap Bechinas Ha'ora Levad. Once you've had that Tzimtzum Atzmas, then the Nakuda is only like a Ha'ora. It's just that since it's come in the form of a leftover from a tremendous Gilui Ein Seifi, therefore it's in the form of a Nakuda. Of a Be'emes, it's a Ha'ora Bil, it's a Ha'ora Bilpach. V'zehu, he says, and that's what's brought down in the famous portion of the Zohar Kodesh, where it's right near the end of the Zohar, in the Hidra Rabbah, where Rabbi Shimon talks about the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim and the Shaykhs that they have to the different spheres. He writes over there that Abba Yoinek Mi Mazlo, that the inyan of Chochma literally nurtures from a mazal. And it's well known that when the Zohar Kodesh uses the word mazal, it means a moshel of the inyan of Cyrus, like hairs. And this is the Shaykhs, to a certain extent, of the inyan of Keser and Pnimis HaChochma, well, not Pnimis HaChochma, where the inyan of Chochma with the inyan of the hairs of the head and also the hairs of the Zokein, the beard. So the inyan is that Chochma is yonik from a mazal, and that mazal is the inyan of mazolas and cyrus, the moshel of hairs. Now the inyan of that portion of the Zohar says that Chochma is yonik from the mazel, and it calls over there the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim, it calls them mazoles. And it says that Abba is yonik from the mazel of Noiter Chesed La'alofim. The mazel Noiter, well, that's where Chochma is the mazel Ches. That's actually the eighth mazel. Well, that's where Chochma is yonik. And there's a whole period, instead of wide up from the Inyan Mazel, which is called Neiter. Well, that's another, Inyan was saying Karamochem to go into it. However, why do we say that Chochma has its nurturement from something which is called like a hair, a saira? And the mazoles are called like sairas. Now, why would they be called mazoles? Because the inyan of mazoles is another name, for example, for the heavenly bodies, or what you might call planets, or things of that nature, are called mazoles. And so we see, according to the Rambam in the Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, that the Rambam says that the mazoles are just like media, where they take hashpoah from the heavens higher, and they just pass it over, and it goes down and becomes more shayat to the lower oilam. That's what he calls the planets in the form of mazoles.
Does that mean he thinks they're sort of Tzimtzum?
Huh?
Does that mean to say the Rambam holds the mazoles are Tzimtzum?
Yeah, well, we'll see. Pnimis and they have a shaykhus to Tzimtzum. Yeah. And we're going to see it's quite a large Tzimtzum, because they take the ruchnistic hashpoah, the ruchnis of the Malachim, he said over there, and they pass it down into hashpoah gashmis almost, into the lower oilam, till eventually it becomes hashpoah gashmis in the world. Edify. That's connected, therefore these mazoles are called cyrus. Well, I don't know if you're playing with the cyrus on your arm. It would be perfectly alright without you playing with them.
trying to make the Yiddish a little.
Yeah, the other Tirutim, we'll say them for another time. Mazolas Usayres, he said, the Inyan Asayres, hu am shocher bederach dilug vehefsek agu goylet. Shehi ha'ora shebaina lich, kamish kosef mochi macher. In other words, how does it's brought down in Siddur that the hairs of the head, they are really, their shoirish is in the moya, that they really grow and they draw a certain, how do you call it, unique from the brain. But there's a big interruption between the hair on the outside and the brain, and that's called the skull bone. That's called gulgoyles, the atomic gulgoyles. So what's written is that the hairs grow, and the way they grow from the brain at the beginning is that they're very pneumistic shefa. They're like almost an atmistic shefa. They're very, they have the whole atmos of the moyach in them. But when they hit the gulgoyles, it's like they hit a big hefsek. Because the gulgoyles is like a bone. It's like a very heavy material, and they have to literally split through the bone. They got to jump through the bone. Well, that's like the oyer having to break through the tzimtzum. But the oyer comes to the tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum, as it were, being a withdrawal, interrupts the flow of the oyer. And what's on the other side is only like a ha'ora bill. Bilvat. So the same with the Sayres hit the Etzema Gulgoyles, and then what actually comes out as a gilui in the head, in the hairs of the head, is only a inyan from what we call ha'ora, which is bo b'derach dilug v'hefsek. It comes by way of jumping and through a interruption. And therefore he says, that's the inyan of the Sayres, k'moi keinu am shocher b'chinas chochma, ha'ora ha'bo b'chinas dilug v'hefseka, tzimtzum that we explained before, which is very similar to the tzimtzum Arishain, but it's kind of like a big hefsek, and the inyan of chochma is called a unique from the mazal of noitzer. In other words, it's a mazal from the Yud Gimel Midas Arachim, and it's unique from that mazal because it comes through dilug v'hefseka atzimtzum. By mash kosef machimacha pa'agoyes la'biyu bo'eira tovku samchet. That's a mimer from the Alter Rebbe in a Sefer, which I didn't have, it's not available to me right now, so therefore I wasn't able to see what is exactly the reference over there. Ba'ainu k'moishen is bo'li yil, dam shoches ha'chochma mil maila me'achokma, hu b'chinas toimeach. If you remember in the previous mimer, we learned at great length that the inyan of chochma to atzilas, from chochma how it is, in Chochma Stimoya, Pnimis Chochma Stimoya, how it is in Ari, we said that's only Kocha Atzoimeya Bilvat, the way it comes out in the, and there's one on Lamaila, the 4 levels of Doimim, Tzomeya, Chai, and Medaber are also there. So the inyan from Chochma is called Tzomeya, even though it's such a very high madriga, and Chai is the inyan of Chochma Shebekesa, the inyan from Chochma Stimoya, and then Kesa Mamish, that's called Medaber. That's the level of Medaber. Remember we had that mentioned several times in the Maimah Bashmini Atzeres, that the Gilui of Chochma Batzilas is called Koyach HaTzoimeach Bilvad, which means that it's come through a whole inyan of Tzimtzum and Dilug of Tzimtzum. Just like when a plant grows out through the ground, it has to break through the surface of the ground, etc. The Rebbe says, "V'hinei b'dei liyesh hamshoches ha'chochma hu alidei zerusa delatata." So here's the fascinating thing: in order that whole process should occur, in other words, there should be a inyan from Gilui ha'chochma l'mayla alidei, the meaning from mazel v'neitzer. It should come with the inyan from Abba. Should be miskala from the mazala with the whole inyan through the inyan from Tzimtzum Godel. He said that's all tolui in the Avedas Adam Lamata. It's tolui in the Yisus Telatata, or the Aved of Yidden Lamata. So you might say that. I think the Eivshter makes all these inyanim. So therefore it's going on, a famous statement of the Arizal over there in we're going to say the Rebbe Chaim Vital B'Shem Arizal, that he says that everything that the Eibishter made at the beginning, Einach Hanami, was Chofetz Chesedu, he made it mitzad himself. But Le'achri Mikein, Hakel B'Yisarus Delatata Talia Milsa. Everything is dependent in the Aveda of the Bnei Adam Harayala. Lamata, they got to be Ma'ir and Mamshik the Indian, that it should be all the Giluim Harayala Maila. B'Yisarus Delatata Tat the Eibishter, all Tolu now in Yisarus Delatata. In other words, that there should be the Inif and Gilei, the Chokhmah D'Atzilas. So you might say, what does interest me, Chokhmah D'Atzilas? So the answer is, if we weren't Chokhmah D'Atzilas, then you wouldn't be sitting there, even nodding your eyes in such a weary way. Your B'chlau wouldn't be sitting there. Or need the Inif and Chokhmah D'Atzilas. And the Father says that there should be that Gilui, but there are Tzimtzum of the Chitonius of Chokhmah to bring about Chokhmah outside to say the D'Atzilas. Well, that has to be Davke through Yisarus Torah, Tata through the Avedis Adam. How? Between bitul in a form of self-adequate nullification, bitul. The Hanochas Atzmusei Davke. But Hanochas Atzmusei means putting yourself aside altogether. Completely and utterly laying yourself aside. Bitul Mikova. So we see that in order for the Eibishter to bring about that Gilui HaChokhmah Shalamayla, the Eibishter had to be, as it were, he had to be Masalik his whole self aside. There had to be put away the whole Ha'atzmus on a side, that he should have this Mochi of the Nakuda. So similarly, if you wanted the world to keep going, you wanted things should be how they should be, and there should be Gilui Elokus in the world, then you had to put yourself aside. You have to be in a form of Hanochas Atzmusei. Now we're now going to enter into an explanation. In order to understand the Inif and Hanochas Atzmusei, we're going to go through a few little levels of different Oifani Aveda until we reach the point of Hanochas Atzmusei. So we see that it's not such a simple story. And if you want to Tosefos Piyuv B'zeh, then you look up in Tanya, Perek Mem Tes, you see that's what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says over there that the Eibishter made a tzimtzum, Godel B'Yotzum, in order to bring about the elements. What's the Aveda, the Adam? What does he have to do? He has to put himself aside, Legamrei, and be Metzamtzim, Mesatzim, B'Kol Inyono, as they state that in. That's what's written here. V'Even Achech Tzas. But it's basically the same Nakuda. Tehine yesh bittul habo alideis bon. There's a sort of bittul which comes through understanding and reflection on Elokus. In other words, what you might call a geshmaka bittul. Right? You understand something and you misbeinen in it. It makes a lot of sense to you. And so therefore the bittul of that is what we call hergish oyer eloki. You feel divine light, you feel dominating, you feel divine. Why shouldn't you be bottled? So you give yourself over to that divine eloki, to that divine light that you felt. Vainu shabitul hu alidei b'chinus hergish oyer eloki b'nafshei shalidei seh hu b'chinus harotzen v'atshuka lelo. Because he's got a tremendous rotzen and a desire for Elokus, ulahepach leachfaya l'sitra acher. Anything which is from sitra acher, anything which is not Elokus, he wants to bend it over and break it. What does that mean? Kol mashu ulahepach mi Elokus. Everything which is hepach mi Elokus, he doesn't want it. He wants to break it. He wants something to torment them. And that's all because there's this hergish, and this desire for Elokus. And that's called bittul. But we'll see that that's not emes a bittul. That's a bittul. Oh, that's bittul because you want to be bottled. You feel Elokus. You be masik Elokus. You was beinen. You understood the greatness of Elokus. Why shouldn't you want to be bottled? Oh, but it's not called Hanochas Atzmusei. Therefore, that only brings down certain levels, but doesn't bring down the original appearance of Chokhmah. And he said, in that kufa, having a hergish and a yiseirus and Elokus, which comes mitzad Avona v'Asogi in Elokus, or in that there's two different manners or forms. And we'll see about that as we go along, that the two forms of his boniness, one higher than the other, but they all remain in the general picture of his boniness. If I remember, the rotzen and the hergish that the mensch has is all connected with what he really appreciated. However, there's one Indian from our which is poor, like we saw, in from Mamali Kolam Mamish, which comes Lafi Seder Ishtalshas Hilames, and then there's another Indian of being misbeinen in the earth Lamaylam Yoelam. The earth of Mufla Yoelam, not Mamish Maki, upon Mufla, and that elevates you to a much higher form of heritage. But it doesn't cause you to be completely Mavatal yourself altogether. And even from Hanochas Atzmusa, we're going to see that it's under that's they call it. And Akuda Meneyu Upei Mamish Tuich Pnimisa Adam Mamish. Is that's Indian and Moshiach. The Indian and Moshiach is an Hanochas Atzmusa altogether. Some people think Chabad, Chabad, wonderful, these amazing revelations, divine understanding, divine philosophy. That's one Indian Chabad. And there's another Indian Chabad, complete giving away of itself. The Rebbe said, you have to stand on your head. So you got to bring Mashiach. Isn't it? Eh?
Ja, ja.
Amen, ken je?